Hey everyone, I'm Mike and I'm here with Isaac.
Hello.
And there's something I really want to discuss. Now, there's a lot going on in the gaming world that we could be talking about, but there's something that just crossed my mind the other day. I feel like it's worthy of like a discussion on its own. So, I was just listening to some video game music, some old video game music at work the other day, and was listening to some music of a game I used to play called Seal Online. It's like an old 3D MMO. And I remember that the people who did the music for that game was a composer group named Soundtemp, and Soundtemp made the music for a little known game called Ragnarok Online, and that reminded me, hey, isn't there a Ragnarok Online 3 coming out? Yeah, and I looked it up, and yeah, it is a game that they're working on, and it's a game that I've been kind of sort of looking forward to. And then I brought this up to Isaac, saying that, hey, remember Ragnarok Online? It's coming back. And I was like, I showed him this game, and it's like, and I remember him saying like, you weren't like very interested in. And I was like, why not? It's a game that you grew up with. It's a game that I feel that would have a lot of like fond memories of playing. So I was wondering why you were into it. I remember you saying like, yeah, it's just not into that kind of game anymore, and which is fair to say because it's a genre that like I know that a lot of people don't have a lot of time for. But I was also thinking to myself like, why you wouldn't be interested in like at least giving it a try for just like old time's sake. And I was just like thinking to myself, hmm, is this really a good nostalgia? Is nostalgia a good way to just like promote a game? Is there like a right or wrong way to use like nostalgia when it comes to promoting a video game? And I was just kind of curious if anyone out there had the same kind of thoughts. Like, what do you think if there's a right and wrong way to use nostalgia to promote a video game? Now, with that, like that topic in mind, is there like you have any initial thoughts? I was curious.
Well, when you brought me this topic of nostalgia, I was thinking about it last night, and the definition of nostalgia is something that's yearning, something that has sentimental feels that bring you back to a certain time of remembrance. I'm very paraphrasing that though, but eventually the whole point of nostalgia, like you said, is to bring you back to a time where you felt like, hey, you felt good. You felt good about this whole situation, and it made me go back to thinking of the games that made me feel nostalgia. And one of the great examples that you're thinking about right now, I think one of the games that we played right now were the TMNT games back in the day when Konami, when you were a kid and you were in the arcade and you had all these, four-player co-op, and then now you have a new generation of games where you could take those same characters, and I think they made a new game called Shredder's Revenge. Only
No, we
uh,
don't think they did.
they
They
did.
actually did
Well,
make
they
that
did make a new game
game.
called Shredder's Revenge, and that kind of captured that old school Konami four-player arcade experience that came from the television show. So, I think nostalgia kind of works in both ways. I think at the end of the day, it's about something that you honestly, truly remember growing up and playing as a kid. And I think even another great example too that they're releasing a brand new I think Maximum. I think a Marvel Maximum with brand new games. I think they're bringing back the X-Men game. They're bringing back Carnage and the Spider-Man and with the X-Men. And I think they're also bringing back a new like Carnage Revenge, old school classics that were back from the NES. So that again, I go back to thinking about the X-Men games where they had what, six-player co-op back in the day in those cabinets, which kind of, you could argue and say, almost ushered in the renaissance of pretty much more of these cool tag team beat 'em ups and putting in coins and stuff like that. So yeah, when you think about games like that, those are games that just give you such a fantastic nostalgia feeling when you're a kid. And because of that, the X-Men game, it pushed for new games like Marvel Cosmic Invasion that came out that has that old school 16-bit feel when you sit down and play games. So when it comes to nostalgia in that frame, yeah, that's kind of how I remember games as well too. So
Yeah, that's great. That's lovely. That's great and all. But now going back to the initial like
I like how you just
discussion
dissed that.
topic.
Oh yeah, it's great, it's lovely, but
No, it's just that
let's
it
talk
was.
about the real thing.
Yeah, but
About
it's great and all
nostalgia.
about nostalgia. Yeah, I get you. I totally understand. I totally understand those feelings of how you feel enjoying these old games or games that like look similar to old games or old experiences you had growing up. Yeah, it's good enough. But I was just kind of asking, do you feel there's a right or wrong way to use nostalgia as part of like promoting your game? Because I have some ideas in my head regarding that, and I was just kind of curious if you like had that, if you thought that deep.
Yeah, I think there's great ways of promoting nostalgia. Again, like you said, we brought up a lot of the two games that I sat down and brought up because, again, it's using nostalgia only works when you remember something fondly back in your childhood days. Like if you
Obviously,
watch TMNT, watch X-Men, that's one of the great ways to use nostalgia to be able to market your game. So again, it has to. The only way that nostalgia works is if you finally remember something that you
yeah,
enjoy.
obviously. Okay,
Otherwise, nostalgia, the marketing just honestly doesn't work because I know there's another game you're going to sit down and bring up. Let's bring up a great example Bugsy. Granted, like this was coming around the day where everybody was trying to push their mascot. Mario made it famous, Sonic made it famous. Those are two most recognizable video game mascots of all time. So everybody kind of in the 90s started to jump in that bandwagon trying to create as much mascot games as possible. Bugsy was one of the ones that got thrown out. And obviously nobody remembered that because that game was trash. So now it seems like they want to try to take another second shot of it or maybe was good enough to warrant a revival, in 2026 though. But I don't remember anybody who played Bugsy back in the day.
yeah,
So
like
yeah, that I would say I don't know how much nostalgia is going to pay for a game like that to make a comeback, but who knows? And then you think about other cool games like you think of Soul Reaver, it's another game that's kind of popping up the top of my head that has nostalgia value. People that love the Legacy of Khan series might be very excited to sit down and play a game like that because it brought so much nostalgic feelings when they were playing on the PS1. Um, Another big, huge announcement that or nostalgia works is the announcement of the God of War trilogy. Like, let's go back to the PlayStation 2. Again, now you're thinking about people that grew up on the PlayStation 2 that sat down and played that game and loved that game. So you're making a big announcement for a complete trilogy. That's going to sell well because on top of that, they've been still making God of War games with Ragnarok with the Norse mythology. I think two games. I don't think they made a trilogy off that yet, but of those two games, and now you're throwing them with an old school trilogy, which we don't know it's going to be a remake, but that's a nostalgic feeling for people that played those games back in the day too. So, yeah, I think as long as those characters are popular, that's always going to be the number one biggest sell to be able to sell nostalgia to any fan base.
yeah, okay, yeah, that's cool. And yeah, I totally get it. It seems like you're very much just in for. But I'm just kind of fearing. Did you feel this again? With that all being said, well, you feel that there's like a wrong way of using nostalgia, and I think I'm gonna answer that at this point because I think
I
you
think I said it more
said,
positive. Yeah, you
but
told me what the wrong way it
anyways,
is because
because
there's possibility a wrong way of using nostalgia.
yeah, because just going back to the initial thing that wanted me to like have this discussion is again Ragnarok Online 3. And yeah, it's a game that again I played a lot when I was younger. Had a
Mm.
lot of fond memories, some nasty ones. Probably one of the first times I ever experienced cyberbullying, but is what it is. It was just something that I had to deal with growing up. But it was a very I have a lot of nostalgic feelings for it. That being said, the more I think about it, the more I see the game and how it's being presented, I feel like this could be an instance of the wrong way of using nostalgia to like promote the game. And the reason I say that is because the company Gravity is a company that ever since the initial release of Ragnarok Online, it's a company that has steadily had an issue with quality control. It's had an issue with quality. It had an issue with just monetization. And as time went on, it was a company that gained a very, very bad reputation when it comes to making their games or just keeping the Ragnarok IP relevant in the modern day age and stuff like that. Because you see, Ragnarok Online has actually had a very big issue when it comes to its sequels because at one point it had two sequels. The first one was actually very poorly received. It was critically panned by a lot of the players. Then it got shut down, and they had decided to make a new version of Ragnarok Online 2. I believe it was called Legend of the Second or something like that. And basically, that had like better gameplay or something like that, but it was basically just World of Warcraft with a Ragnarok like skin on it, and that also didn't really appeal to a lot of people. It basically was just a very mediocre experience. And then for several years, they basically just like I can't I guess to put it lightly, they basically hoard out the series on some mobile devices and they release multiple versions of like Ragnarok Online on mobile, basically just like milking the IP and the name for all it was worth. And all of those games were basically harking on nostalgia, like a little bit, probably a little bit too much, while not feeling like a Ragnarok Online game. So those games
Mm.
weren't very popular. So now they said, okay, let's make Ragnarok Online 3, but let's give it the visual style of the very first Ragnarok game that everybody knows and loves, and let's market it with all this like, nostalgic feelings, and so I say all this basically goes full on member berries, basically, to quote South Park. It's just like remember this, remember that, and it just feel like I feel like this is just a dis with the reputation of the company and how much Ragnarok didn't really succeed in like a lot of modern markets. It feels like this is a very bad way to use nostalgia to try to, promote the game because it feels like it's riding on that and only that.
Well, I think it only works because, like you said, it's only bad because of the reputation of the of the publisher right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that also plays a big part of it. I think when you worry about companies that are taking on these projects, you hopefully they're very well credited and doing other game works that you
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed and that you have respect for. Again, the reason why Shredder's Revenge and Marvel's Cosmic Invasion works because you played TMNT Shredder's Revenge and how they were able to take on that nostalgia old school retro 18 pop game. So you were comfortable when they
Mm-hmm.
released that game out because
Yeah.
the publisher and the developers are very credited. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that plays a very important, interesting market. Another thing I think you bring up in terms how companies have kind of butchered nostalgia. I think about the 2000s, the late to teen 2000s, the Sonic franchise.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a franchise that was just squabbling for the longest period of time because when you went back and played, you know, the the Sonic games back in the 90s, it was just the rush of speed. We always wanted a game that had that rush of speed, and then they went to the Sonic Adventure series that kind of figured a way to offer a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
both. And then after that, it's been bad. They never were able to seem to capture that nostalgic moment that gamers have always wanted back in the 90s, and at least from Sonic Adventure. And for a while, we've had a couple of ups and downs, and with that franchise, and to the point that a lot of people were making fun of it to the point that they felt like Sonic was just um, being milked for all it's worth for the nice way of saying it, because of the way they were just kind of issuing a brand new Sonic game in the hope that that Sonic game would be that game that brings me that joy that I've always wanted when I played Sonic as a kid. So there's a great example. So that's one of my examples, I would say, in terms of Sega kind of burying their own major character for a long period of time. Now, the Sonic games, I think, are doing a little bit more better now. But for a long period of time, when they're releasing Sonic games, they just could not get that feeling right.
Yeah, and obviously, I guess it just comes down to the fact that a lot of the people that formed Sonic Team eventually left,
Also,
and
very important.
and just like when you have like the people that initially made Sonic what it was aren't there anymore, and you leaving it to a bunch of like amateurs or just people who are just generally just not like have an idea of what the gameplay of how the gameplay is supposed to look or feel like, and then it just like obviously again it really hurts it. And then again, going back to Ragnarok Online 3 again, jeez, sorry about that. But as I was saying, going back to Ragnarok Online 3, it also to mention that at halfway through like the initial like version of like Ragnarok 1, eventually the main creator of the Ragnarok Online game eventually left the company, formed their own company called IMC Games, and eventually decided they wanted to make a spiritual successor to Ragnarok Online called Tree of Savior. Now, that's a game that has its own history of issues, but that was a game that was 100% trying to be a true successor to the first Ragnarok on game, especially in terms of visuals, because like again with Ragnarok, the two Ragnarok sequels, they were going in a completely different direction visually, and it didn't look or feel anything like the Ragnarok that everybody grew up with. So basically, Tree of Savior was supposed to basically come in and feel that, and they are the original developers who made that game. So obviously, when you're basically more inclined to say, let's support them because they are the original developers of a game that I like, and that they are ones responsible for all the nostalgic feelings I have for that game, rather than just sticking with the game that has the game that I grew up with, but has a completely new development team that I don't trust.
It's a tough situation too, because especially like you said, when developers leave the studio to help make the game that was great, yeah, you want to trust in them though, but they don't have the IP anymore. Like I think that does hurt when developers don't have the original IP to build on, where they have to kind of build from scratch again. So yes, even though these developers that worked on this game, they're starting from the bottom up again, and now they have to prove to you as the gamer that this is just as good than the project you originally worked on, because that doesn't normally work out. Here's a great example: the Mighty Nine. The developer that left Capcom, who made Mega Man, he left to join Kickstarter to start the Mighty Nine project. And from that, when I heard, I think there was a lot of issues.
Well, Kenji Inafune was not the creator
or the
of
developer.
I think he was like a designer. I forget what he was role with.
Okay,
with the whole Mega Man.
Was he a part of the Mega Man?
But he was not the actual creator.
Okay,
he was. I forget what the whole deal was. In fact, I need to look up like Kenji Inafune. And what is this deal?
Well, it was an interesting. It was a big deal in terms of the fact that he played a part. You probably forgot, because I forgot about it for a long period of time. But I knew there was a big deal of taking that. He worked on Mega Man of some point.
He designed Mega Man.
Okay,
he's the designer of Mega Man.
Okay,
he didn't actually create Mega Man.
Okay,
he
designed the Mega Man look.
Yes.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. But I guess the gamble was.
Wait. Actually, let me just make sure I'm getting that details like correct.
I feel like he played a bigger part than just the create. Well,
no,
creating the character's important.
Okay, so they even created either. Like, so what the hell did Kenji Inafune do? I'm sorry, this is so much like I remember a huge controversy about him being tied to Mega Man, but not truly being the creator. I'm trying to read through this like. No, it's like, yeah, the original. I
Who was the
just
original creator
half
of
a
Mega
job.
Man?
Like I said, okay, it's just like was the designer of the original Mega Man. His mentor was the original creator. Had a basic concept of Mega Man was supposed to look like, and so only did half the job in creating him. So I guess he like half ownership of creating Mega Man.
So it was he was a co-creator.
Yeah, I guess
Okay,
it's just
all right, interesting.
yeah, it's just like
Well, either way, I guess he was trying to bank on his name.
yes.
He was definitely trying to bank on his name that he was a co-creator of Mega Man to be able to make his own project.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there you go. One of the uses of trying to use nostalgia and your name base to try to push said nostalgia. Where at the end of the day, the game kind of backfired because I don't remember anybody.
Nobody liked that. The game was it didn't certainly didn't help. There was drama behind the
Yeah.
Kickstarter scenes with the people, with the community managers that they hired.
Mm-hmm.
Just Kickstarter rewards not going out properly,
Yeah.
goals not being met.
It was a complete
And the
mess.
over gameplay was just mediocre. It was a huge mess.
Yeah. I heard it was a very huge
But
mess.
he absolutely tried to use his name in the whole that say, "Hey, I made Mega Man,"
Or
quote unquote.
co-created Mega Man.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they tried to use that nostalgia, that name.
Because I
to be
remember,
able to
well,
create that
because when
game.
he originally promoted Mighty Number Nine, he was openly saying that he created Mega Man, and then people and eventually came in to set the record straight before he started saying, "Yeah, I just co-created it." Because so he's a little bit of a snake in the grass when it comes to that, and it sucks. It really just sucks because
Oh, okay.
yeah, it was a whole mess. But yeah, it's a perfect example of like using nostalgia incorrectly. I guess one more thing I did want to mention personally,
Mhm.
because again, before you already mentioned Bubsy 4D, but I also wanted to like again talk about Bubsy 4D because I feel that's also a good way of using nostalgia, but in a different way. Because as mentioned, the original Bubsy games were actually the first one, the 1 and 2 games were just like kind of just mediocre, had a lot of issues. They were playable, but it was just a cut rate version of other better platform games. The one that really effed like the reputation of the character was Bubsy 3D because it was like it looked awful. It just had just like bad environments, bad gameplay, and it had tank controls, and just like Bubsy was the worst, most annoying he ever was. Obviously, there also was sort of 2 games that were released after that, but nobody really. They were also very mediocre. Now with this new game, it's actually given to a development team that actually wants to make a good platform game using Bubsy. I believe the development team is called Fabraz or something like that. They made it some other platform games that was also very well received. And the Bubsy 4D game actually uses nostalgia like very like sparingly because it mentions a lot of its past, but and it also uses a little bit of self-deprecating humor, saying, yeah, Bubsy 3D was the old games were kind of mad. Bubsy 3D was awful." But you know what? I completely accept that those old games were awful, but it doesn't really matter. Let's push towards the future. And it's actually using nostalgia in a different way. Again, with the whole self-deprecating humor, and it doesn't feel like it goes too deep in like making fun of itself. Because when Bubsy 4D was initially announced, I thought it was gonna be basically every 5 seconds it's gonna say, "Ha ha ha, my old games really sucked," right, guys? Ha ha ha. But no, it's not like that. It's actually referencing the past in a very like modest and tasteful way, and I actually really appreciate that way of using like the old games and a little bit of nostalgia to promote itself like that.
But the game's not out yet.
It's not out yet. There is a demo. I played the demo. I actually liked it. It was pretty good. It was tons of references to the old Bubsy games as well as the Bubsy like cartoon pilot that never officially aired. So if you really love Bubsy, then there's a lot to love here. Surprisingly.
I mean, again, if people are for that's totally great. Again, I don't remember a ton of people that played it back in the day, so but I guess there was enough people in order for them to try to make a brand new game that's honestly sitting down and coming out. So again, like you said, if they're able to, like you said, use nostalgia in a more interesting way to point out, the bugs of these games, then
Mm-hmm.
go for it. Honestly, sit down and go for it. At the end of the day, but again, it's definitely going to be really interesting to see how that gets responded.
Yeah, I
how
mean, people already responded to it very well.
mm,
People like say the gameplay is tight, it's very good. Bubsy is actually likable for the first time ever. And just like it's fun to speed run in the game. And there's also just a lot of like again a lot of like Easter eggs, a lot of like referential humor, and all this little like details and stuff that a lot of people seem to really resonate and appreciate with. I personally actually I've never been the biggest fan of Bubsy. Again, I only played like the first game. It was okay, but it kind of just made me whenever I played it, I kind of just wish I was playing like in Sonic or Mario. But again, in this game in particular, again, they made him a lot more like relatable. He still obviously he still likes to reference his past like a lot. And again, I just like the fact that they made him like down to earth and stuff like that. And he actually has something that I can relate to, the fact that he's a character that's basically in his 40s, but he hasn't given up on his dreams yet. So I think that's something that I can relate to personally, considering my age. But yeah, I think that when you just like when you bring that up, I think that's also just something really good to just like or something really nice and nostalgic about that as well.
yeah. No, again, well, again, if it pays off, hopefully it pays off for Bugsy in the long run and the development and stuff like that too. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So basically, as mentioned, that's basically all the like examples that I can think of regarding like right and wrong ways of trying to use nostalgia to promote your game. And with that all being said, what do you think about this topic? Do you think there's a right and wrong way to use nostalgia to promote your games? Is there any particular games that you were nostalgic for, or any games that you ended up disliking, but you got it anyway because of nostalgia? So just let's talk about it. If you like what we do here, please rate, comment, and subscribe. I'm Mike with Isaac, and we are saying peace.